Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you my collection of vintage and vintage-inspired sewing patterns. I don't have that many patterns in my collection right now, but the ones that I do have in my collection I absolutely love, and I've spent a long time looking for some of these patterns because some of them are on the rarer side. But I'm also going to be including vintage-inspired patterns in the video today, as well as modern reproductions of vintage sewing patterns as well. So if you're interested in sewing vintage garments, you might find this video useful to pick up some ideas for sewing patterns and where you can get vintage or vintage inspired sewing pattern. I'll also be letting you know what I've sewn up from these patterns, if I've made anything from them already, as well as my thoughts about the patterns in general. So if you're interested in learning about vintage sewing patterns, please keep watching. So the first patterns I want to show you today are modern reprints of authentic vintage sewing patterns. I buy these from a seller called Lady Marlowe on Etsy. She collects vintage patterns, scans them all, and makes them available to purchase, and she reprints them on solid paper. So you're getting an authentic pattern, but you aren't getting an old pattern itself, you're getting it on modern paper. True vintage pattern collectors probably wouldn't be too interested in this, but if you're just someone who wants to learn how to sew vintage garments, this is a great affordable way to find vintage sewing patterns. So one of the first patterns I ever got was actually this Advance pattern, Advance 2467. I ordered it from Lady Marlowe Sewing Patterns on Etsy, and as you can see, this pattern is so cute. It's for a 1940s bathing suit. The bathing suit itself looks like a short little dress. So it comes with the dress, it comes with a jacket, as well as a top and a pair of shorts for a play suit set. Despite loving this pattern so much, I haven't made anything from this pattern yet. When I do sew something up from this pattern, I'm likely going to start with the play suit set, so the top and the little skirt, because I think they look so cute together. What really caught my eye was the little bow at the top of the skirt. I think it's so cute. And I also love the illustrations on the front of this pattern. I think these girls that have been drawn just look like they're having a fun day at the beach. And I also love the illustrations of the red fabrics in this pattern as well. It just makes me want to sew it up. So this is one that I love and I'm hoping to make something from very soon. So the next reprint of a vintage pattern that I have here is this one that I also got from Lady Marlowe Patterns on Etsy. And as you can see, it's a sewing pattern for a play suit. It also comes with a skirt and a pattern for a blouse as well. And I just love every piece in this pattern. The only one that I might not make for myself would be the blouse. I think the puffy sleeves would just go horribly wrong on me, but I love the play suit. It was actually one of the first things I ever tried to sew, but I had no idea what I was doing. I chose a really lightweight fabric and I didn't know anything about seam allowances, so it just didn't fit well, it didn't look right, so I abandoned that project. But I do still love the pattern itself, and so this summer I'd love to sew up this little short play suit. I think it's so cute and I think it would look great in a linen. And I also love how the fitted bodice looks with the skirt. I think it looks incredibly modern. Things like that are really fashionable right now, and so I'm happy to have a pattern in my collection that would allow me to sew something like that. So next up from Lady Marlowe Patterns is this beautiful wrap top. And again, this was one of the first patterns I ever bought. I've never sewn this one up before. I do have multiple wrap top patterns in my collection, so this one fell by the wayside in favor of some other patterns. In addition, I did plan to sew it up towards the start of my sewing journey, but I bought a heavyweight linen, like a 9 or 10 ounce linen, and when I got it, I just knew that it wouldn't work well for a wrap blouse. I don't think it would have been very breathable. But that being said, I do still love this pattern. It's not on the top of my priority list to sew right now, just because I think more modern wrap tops are a better choice for my figure. I think this vintage style wrap top might accentuate my broader shoulders. But that being said, I do want to sew it up at some point, and I am happy to have it in my collection. So next up is yet another pattern from Lady Marlowe on Etsy, and this one is for this beautiful drapey 1930s blouse. I have actually sewn up this pattern. I made this pattern in a blue stretch velvet last Christmas, and I wore it on Christmas Eve, and I love how it turned out. The stretch velvet was a nightmare to work with, I'm not going to lie, but I knew that going in. The pattern itself came up quite large on me. It's partially my fault because I used something with a lot of stretch, and I don't think this pattern is necessarily designed for stretch, but I do think even if I had sewn it up in a non-stretch fabric, it still would have come out quite large on me. So I would like to make this again, but I would definitely have to make some modifications before I do for it to fit right. A few things that originally drew me to this pattern, one was the draping that we see going on in the front of the bodice. It's just so beautiful, and it's so old Hollywood to me. The second thing is I love the sleeve detail. So there's some gathered sleeves going on the forearm, and it's just so beautiful. Again, it's one of those old-timey details that you don't see in modern clothing and modern sewing patterns that much anymore. So I'm happy to have this sleeve pattern in my collection as well. I can always pair the sleeve with another bodice if I ever want to do that. And lastly, the cute little belt around the waist. Again, I don't think you see this as much in modern clothing, but I do think it's a super cute look, and I made a matching belt to go with my velvet top, and I loved wearing them together. So overall, this is definitely one of my favorite vintage sewing patterns in my collection. So next up, yet another one from Lady Marlowe on Etsy. Is this 1940s slip pattern, and I just adore this slip. I think it looks super cute in both views here, so the strappy version as well as the one with the thicker straps. So I have made this strappy version before. I made it in a rayon crepe, and I featured it in my spring sewing video last year, but I'll put a picture up on the screen. I really love how this turned out. However, I had the same issue as with some of the other vintage patterns in my collection in that it came out way too large on me. I chose the size that corresponds with my bust and waist size, but it came out at least 2 sizes too big. I had to take in a ton of fabric, and I do think when you have to take in something like that, it can lose the really nice look of the princess seam. So I would sew this up again, but I would need to make some alterations to it first so that it fits me properly, because I think the appeal with a pattern like this is really having it fit nicely. And so when that didn't work out for me, it was a little bit disappointing. So next up, I have a pattern from a modern company, and what they do is they create sewing patterns that are designed to look vintage. So this is their 1930s butterfly blouse pattern from Decades of Style. This blouse is inspired by 1930s blouses. It's really drapey, really loose. I have sewn this up before. I think this is a good pattern. However, I made the mistake of trying to sew this up when I was a brand new beginner. There's a little bit of complexity going on in this pattern. First of all, you have to gather the front tie piece, and then you have to do this interesting curved seam. There's bias binding, and then I also sewed it with French seam. So I think the result wasn't as nice as it could have been. I'm willing to give this pattern another try, but I did just feel like the front drapiness and the wrap aspect, it didn't quite look right on me. So again, I don't know if it's the pattern. It could have just been the fact that I was so brand new at sewing and I didn't exactly know what I was doing. But I'll pop up a picture on the screen of the blouse I sewed, and I made this out of authentic 1930s fabric that I got from a seller on eBay who collects these old fabrics and sells them. And I was so happy to be able to sew up a blouse from the 1930s using a pattern that's inspired by the 30s as well as fabric that's actually thought to be from the 30s. So even though this blouse isn't perfect, I just love it so much, and I think the fabric I chose is beautiful. So next up, I have this blouse from Miss Depew, I believe that's how you say it, patterns. To be honest, I'm not sure if these are authentic sewing patterns that are being reprinted or if these are modern patterns that are designed to look vintage. The instructions and pieces do make it seem like it's vintage. They aren't similar pattern pieces to what we would see today. They're cut very differently. I've never actually made this one. I have to say that since I bought it, I'm falling out of love with it. I'm not sure if it's at the top of my priority list to ever sew. I just don't think this cut and style is something that's going to look great on me. So I might pass this pattern along to someone else who would like it more than I do. All right, so moving forward in time a bit to the 70s, I have this really cute Simplicity 8305 pattern. It's a blouse and skirt combo. So I have used this pattern before. I used it to make a billowy blouse. I'll put up a picture on the screen now. The fabric was from Mood Fabrics and it had a face print on it, which I loved. And I just adore this pattern. This is another one where I just love the envelope. All these ladies are out here looking fabulous. They're having a great day. So using this pattern, you can make a coordinated blouse and skirt and kind of make it look like a dress, or you can make separates. I just love this pattern. I think it's super simple. It's kind of a good staple pattern to have in your collection as well. I know a lot of people probably don't need a pattern to make a tiered skirt, but when I was beginning my sewing journey, I just felt more comfortable having a pattern for that. And so I am glad I still have it in my collection. So we're still firmly in the 70s here. Next up, I have 3 patterns that I bought from the same seller, all grouped together. They are for these 70s style short dresses. So the first one is this one, which is a style pattern. And I really love the crisscross top with the cute sleeves and the short skirt. I also have this style 3147 pattern. The dress featured is kind of similar. It doesn't have a crisscross bodice. I mostly thought that this view A was really cool, just giving me some hippie vibes, 70s vibes for sure. And I feel like this view C is kind of just a nice everyday dress. And then finally I have this McCall's 5115, and this one is just hilarious. Like when I look at the envelope on this one, it just makes me smile. Like if this doesn't scream 70s, I don't know what does. To be completely honest, I really only got this one because it came bundled with the other 2. I don't know that I will make any of these anytime soon, but I do love the lace work that's featured in some of these tops and the tie styles going on, so it could potentially be useful for me in the future. I've never sewn up anything from these 3 patterns, but I definitely plan to eventually. I'm more so happy to have the bodices there as building blocks, so if I want a nice crisscross bodice, I'll have that. And there's a few cool sleeves featured in these patterns as well, so it's nice to have those pattern pieces as part of my collection, but I haven't made anything from them yet. All right, so next up is one of my favorite patterns in my collection, and I believe this is either from the late 60s or early 70s. It is this beautiful Polynesian Patterns number 161 for this gorgeous fitted gown with a flare at the bottom and ruffles on the sleeve. I just think this dress is gorgeous. I love the illustration on the front, it's so beautiful. While I don't think I'll have that many occasions to wear a dress like this, I just couldn't let this pattern pass me by. This is one in my collection that's definitely more rare. I don't think this is a pattern you'll see too often at all. So I had to pick it up while I saw it, and I really want to sew this up, honestly, even though I have nowhere to wear something like this. Sometimes it's just fun to sew things for the fun of sewing and the art and style of it all. So this is a pattern that I am dying to make because I just think it is so beautiful. So sticking with the Hawaiian theme here, I have another pattern from a Hawaiian pattern company. This pattern's Pacifica 3009 pattern, and this is actually meant to be a traditional Hawaiian wedding dress pattern. Now, I don't know anything about traditional Hawaiian clothes, so I'd be very interested to hear from anybody who's knowledgeable about this, if they know anything about these types of dresses. But this was another one where as soon as I saw it, I knew I had to have it. I don't think, again, that there's a lot of occasions where I can wear something like this, but this is a dress that I want to sew up just for the fun of sewing and the style and art of it. What really caught my eye with this pattern is the beautiful ruffle detail we see on the bodice as well as the skirt. The sleeves are also gorgeous. They're these billowy gathered sleeves that then go into a tight fitted sleeve. And when I saw this one, I just didn't think I'd ever see anything quite like it, and I was lucky enough that it was available in my size, so I had to go ahead and snatch it up. I haven't made anything from it yet, but I'm dying to make something soon. All right, we're nearing the end. This one is a pattern from Very Easy Vogue for these Vogue 80s pants. I love these pants. I just wanted a pattern for a nice gathered waist pant with a billowy leg, and I picked this one up from a seller on Etsy. I haven't made these yet because I do have a lot of pants patterns that I love, but I'm definitely holding on to this one because I think it looks like a great pattern. So that is all of my vintage sewing patterns. I hope you enjoyed seeing my little collection. I know that if you're a true vintage pattern collector, you won't consider some of these, you know, authentic as they are reproductions, and that's fine. For me, I just am really interested in the sewing of the garment. It doesn't matter to me so much if I have an authentic vintage pattern or not, or whether or not it's the old print or if it's a new reproduced print. But I'm super happy with the patterns in my collection, and I do find it inspiring to look to previous times to find inspiration for style. Fashion is so cyclical, as we know, so it's amazing to look back at these patterns and see details that are popular today. You know, as I'm looking back at my patterns, I'm seeing things from all of the decades that I have here represented in modern clothing. I'm noticing covered buttons are popular on dresses again like they were in the 30s. Things like tiered skirts and billowy blouses from the 70s are also always in style, as we know. And then I just love having those few special patterns that I feel like you would never find anything quite like them in modern times. Let me know what your favorite vintage or vintage inspired sewing pattern is. I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider giving me a thumbs up. And if you like these types of videos, please do subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.